Hello and thank you for joining us again for another episode of Kidnapped Hearts, the weekly TV show brought to you by the International Criminal Court against child kidnapping. We are committed to bringing you the ugly truth about the corrupted family court systems and the heinous crimes against children, which the government continues to turn a blind eye to. Today, we have an episode that needs your urgent attention. We'll be uncovering a corrupt system where children are being deliberately drugged in foster care for the benefit of the state. Sadly, those with voices that are too small to speak up are often the ones who are the most vulnerable. And for many children across the world, this is tragically too often the case. In the United States, every day, children are being taken away from their family homes, sometimes in circumstances that are unfounded and unjust. Their young lives become further abused within a system that was essentially established to protect them. They are often left to languish in the care system for many years, with no sign of being reunited with their loved ones. These experiences often lead to mental, emotional, and sometimes even physical suffering. Here are some harrowing facts for you. There is believed to be around 428,000 children in the American foster care system at any given period. It is estimated that in the United States, on average, a child will remain in the care system for around 2 years, and the average age of a child in the care system is 9 years old. In 2015, there were more than 670,000 children who spent time in foster care in the United States, and out of those children, more than half of them were ethnic minorities. And whilst all this is going on, there is something even far more sinister brewing in the underbelly of the social care system. A lot of these children are being prescribed psychiatric drugs at doses higher than the maximum amount that is approved by the FDA. Yes, you heard me correctly. Psychiatric drugs at doses higher than what is approved by the FDA. The Government Accounting Office, GAO, revealed the overuse and abuse of such drugs in foster care in a report that stated, some states' prescription drugs are covered by Medicaid managed care plans, in which drug payments are included in the capitated payments that plans receive from states. For this review, we selected states that cover psychotropic medications, largely under fee-for-service programs, so that individual drug claims could be analysed. In Michigan, Oregon and Texas, psychotropic medications were primarily paid on a fee-for-service basis. In Florida and Massachusetts, psychotropic prescription claims for most foster children were paid on a fee-for-service basis, with the remaining children largely covered by managed care. ABC News attributed the government's key role in prescribing of some of the most powerful mind-altering drugs to children in the report by saying, overall, the GAO looked at nearly 100,000 foster children in the 5 states and found that more than 1/4 of foster children were prescribed at least one psychiatric drug. The GAO found foster children were prescribed psychotropic drugs at rates up to nearly 5 times higher than non-foster children, with foster children in Texas being the most likely to receive the medications compared to foster children in the other 4 states. Although the actual percentages of children who receive 5 or more psychiatric drugs at the same time were low in the 5 states, including the GAO report, the chances of a foster child compared to a non-foster child being given 5 or more psychiatric drugs at the same time were alarming. In Texas, foster children were 53 times more likely to be prescribed 5 or more psychiatric medications at the same time than non-foster children. In Massachusetts, they were 19 times more likely. In Michigan, the number was 15 times. It was 13 times in Oregon. And in Florida, foster children were nearly 4 times as likely to be given 5 or more psychotropic medications at the same time compared to non-foster children. Foster children were also more than 9 times more likely than non-foster children to be prescribed drugs for which there was no FDA recommended dose for their age. For the most vulnerable foster children, those less than 1 year old, foster children were nearly twice as likely to be prescribed a psychiatric drug compared to non-foster children. When Senator Thomas Carpenter Dedell, lead requester of the GAO report, first learned of the report's findings, he said, I was almost despondent to believe that the kids under the age of 1, babies under the age of 1, were receiving this kind of medication. ABC News has reviewed dozens of medical studies published in recent years that echo GAO's findings, research showing foster children receive psychiatric medications up to 13 times more often than kids in the general population. In some parts of the country, as many as half of foster kids are on one or more psychiatric medications. This compared to just 4% of kids in the general population. One such child who fell into this horrendous cycle was Keontae, an 11-year-old from Texas who ABC News had followed for almost a year. ABC News reported, neglected and often left home alone with his 1-year-old sister, Keontae became a ward of the state at the tender age of 4. Keontae was placed with a relative who, he said, beat him with belts, switches and extension cords, which not only left him with physical scars on his body, he showed ABC News, but, understandably, with anger and despair. Simply too much for the relative, the state of Texas bounced Keontae between 6 foster homes and hospitals over just 4 years. Along the way, Keontae's trauma was treated with an onslaught of psychotropic drugs, powerful mind-altering medicines like the mood stabilizer Depakote, the stimulant Vyvanse, the antidepressant Lexapro, clonidine for ADHD, and the antipsychotic Seroquel. I was put on bipolar meds. I am not bipolar at all, Keontae told ABC News' Diane Sawyer. Keontae was on at least 12 psychiatric medications while in foster care, up to 4 of them at the same time. I was on a whole lot of medicines that I should have not been on, Keontae told ABC News, and his new family, Carol and Scott Cook, were on a mission to get Keontae off drugs. He is now in therapy, beginning to heal. Additionally, his doctor now says Keontae doesn't have ADHD and he's not bipolar. The truth is that it's easy to simply label children within the care system as having various mental illnesses. Children in foster care are 3 times more likely to be diagnosed as having bipolar disorder. The harsh reality is that they're frequently being prescribed these psychiatric drugs not only as a means to control them, but also because these children are potential customers. This should come as no surprise when you consider that Medicaid spends almost $6 billion each year on psychiatric medicine. And if you take into account that foster children receive government insurance from Medicare, which coincidentally includes mental health services, then it all begins to make a bit more sense why no one is ready to address this problem. Each state applies for Medicaid for foster children, and the US Department for Health and Human Service governs these programs that are run by the state. In the 5 states mentioned earlier in the GAO report, $200 million was spent in Texas alone. This is ethically and morally wrong on so many levels. These children, sometimes babies, are torn away from their homes in conditions that are often traumatic. What they need is care, attention, and affection. The last thing they need is psychoactive drugs that disrupt their normal brain function. After these drugs are administered, the child becomes far more sedated and zombie-like, making them far easier to control. Medicines of this nature have an adverse effect in the way a child's brain will develop. Numerous studies have highlighted the way in which such drugs contribute to depression, anxiety, hostility, aggression, and mania. As it progresses to further issues, a cocktail of drugs may be then prescribed to the child, which can cause addiction or further mental issues. It will quickly become a dark place where there is no escape for that young child. Even worse, parents or anyone who challenges these prescription drugs can face the real threat of having the child taken away from their care. One such mother, Patricia Weathers, who objected to her son being medicated, faced the daunting task of fighting the system at her son's school. She said, "The school's coercive tactics finally wore me down, and I drugged my son 2 weeks before the end of his 1st grade year. In 3rd grade, Michael began showing bizarre chewing behaviours, increased anxiety and social withdrawal. He would frequently avoid recess, and when he did go outside for recess, he would stand on the side of the field, shuffling his feet in the dirt, looking down and not socially interacting." The school psychologist's favourite saying through this ordeal was that it was trial and error. If one drug didn't work, then try another. At this point, the school psychologist took me aside and told me that she believed Michael had bipolar or social anxiety disorder and that I should take him to a psychiatrist. I was never at any time made aware that the drug was not FDA approved for children under the age of 18. I specifically asked this doctor if taking this drug with the stimulants that he was on was safe. She assured both medications taken together was perfectly safe. I found much later by other doctors that were no studies ever done on the side effects of the two drugs taken together. My son had violent mood swings and lost any sense of self-control. When I stopped the drugs, Michael hallucinated for weeks later. The school, realising that I was no longer going to drug my child, dismissed him, and then for a final blow proceeded to call Child Protective Services on my husband and I, charging us with medical neglect for failing to give him necessary medication. There is little doubt that these practices constitute blatant cases of child abuse. The drug companies, the federal government and doctors all over the nation are violating children's rights by this sort of behaviour. It does not take a genius to realise that giving drugs of this nature to already traumatised children spells a recipe for disaster for their future growth and well-being. Sadly, none of the organisations related to mental health or child protection have taken a stand against this horrendous malpractice and abuse. As a result, on a daily basis, children are being dished out these mind-altering drugs that are highly dangerous in too many ways to count. It is about time that we give voices to these innocent victims and call upon the authorities to further investigate and change these immoral practices. Those responsible should be held accountable for these monstrous malpractices and abuse of power, not just for the sake of the children, but because the future of the nation depends on it. I encourage you to share this video with your friends and family. This is a problem that affects both adults and children, and we need to join in standing up against these injustices and to raise awareness. That's all we have time for today on our show. Thank you for joining us again for another episode of Kidnapped Hearts. Tell us what you think on our Facebook page at facebook.com/childabductioncourt.org or on our Twitter page at childabductionc. You can also drop us a line at our website, childabductioncourt.eu, or in the comments section below this video. Be sure to tune in next week for another hard-hitting episode with nothing but the facts.